Good morning, students. In the previous class, we started with the new chapter, that is chapter 10, and we learned about light and some of its properties. In this class, we will be going to see how light classifies objects, or how objects are classified based on the transmission of light through them. So based on how objects transmit light, they are classified into three types. They are opaque, transparent and translucent object. So all the objects around us are classified into three based on how they transmit light, and they are classified as opaque, transparent and translucent objects. Let's see what they are. First, let's see what an opaque object is. An opaque object is that object that do not allow any light to pass through them. So all those objects that do not allow light to pass through them are considered as opaque objects. And all the light that comes into contact with an opaque object is either reflected or absorbed by the very same object. So opaque objects are those objects that do not allow any form of light to pass through them, and all the light that is received by the object is either reflected or absorbed by the same object. Now let's see some examples for opaque objects. The examples include the books that you read, the wooden objects around us and the school bag that you carry to your school. So opaque objects are those objects that do not transmit any form of light through them, and the examples include books, wooden objects, school bag, etc. Now let's see the second type of object, that is transparent object. Transparent objects are those objects that allow light to pass through them completely. So transparent objects are all those objects that allow light to pass through them very easily, and we can easily see through these objects. Let's see some examples for that. The examples include the window pane, the glass that we use for drinking liquids, and the reading glass that some people use for reading purposes. So transparent objects are those objects that allow light to pass through them very easily and completely, and these objects are completely see-through. The examples include window pane, the glass. All kind of glass materials are considered as transparent objects, and the reading glass used for reading purposes. So we learned two types of objects, that is opaque objects and transparent objects. Now let's see the third type of object, that is translucent object. So translucent objects are those objects that allows only some amount of light to pass through them. We cannot easily see through these objects like those transparent objects. So translucent objects are those objects which partially allows light to pass through them, and these objects are not completely see-through. Let's see some examples for that. The mosquito nets that we use at home and hostels, and the sunglasses that we use when we go to beach, etc. So translucent objects are those objects which partially allow light to pass through them and are partially see-through. The examples include mosquito nets and sunglasses. Now let's compare these three types of objects. So based on the relative ability to transmit light, objects are basically classified into three types: opaque objects, transparent objects and translucent objects. Opaque object allows no light to pass through them. Transparent objects allows all light to pass through them, while translucent objects allows some amount of light to pass through them. So this was all about the three types of objects based on their ability to transmit light. Now I would like to draw your attention to a picture. In this picture you can see that the man is walking in a sunny day and he is followed by a dark area. Do you know what this dark area is? Yes, this dark area is called shadow. It is very common that when we walk on a sunny day, we are often followed by a darker area which is known as a shadow. Do you know what a shadow is? So let me tell you what a shadow is. When an opaque object comes in the path of light. What is an opaque object? An opaque object is any object which do not allow light to pass through them. So when an opaque object comes in the path of light, light cannot travel further. The light gets stopped by that point. So when the light is stopped in its path by an object, a dark area is formed on the surface behind the object, and this dark area is known as shadow. Now you know that what a shadow is. Do you know how a shadow is formed? Yes. The shadows are formed when an object is blocked by the light. Here in the picture you can see that the sun rays are being hit by the object tree, and the tree is an opaque object, which means the tree do not allow light to pass through them. So that when the opaque object, that is the tree, blocks the ray of light, it forms a darker shade behind the tree, which is known as a shadow. Shadows are formed when an object blocks the ray of light. Now let's see how shadows are formed by different objects. We learned that the objects are classified into three types: opaque object, transparent object and translucent. Let's consider the first kind of object, that is the opaque object. Opaque objects cast dark shadows as they block light completely. We learned that opaque objects are those objects that do not allow light to pass through them, and hence the opaque objects cast dark shadows. Now let's consider the second type of object, that is transparent object. The transparent objects do not cast shadows as they do not block light. We learned that transparent objects are those objects that allow light to easily pass through them, and hence no shadows are formed by transparent objects. The last type, that is the translucent objects, they cast faint shadows as they block light partially. We learned that translucent objects are those objects that allows only a few amount of light to pass through them. Because of this very reason, they cast only faint shadows behind the objects. Now we learned how shadow is formed by various types of objects. Now let's see how various factors affect the shadow formation. The picture here shows the shadow formation at different times of the day. This proves that shadow formation depends on the position of the source of the light from the object. So it is very clear that the position of the source of light from the object affects the size of the shadow. I hope this concept was clear to you. Now let me tell you a fun fact. It is believed that in the ancient times, the ancient men used this connection of shadows and the sun in order to determine the time of the day. How they did this was, they would place a piece of rock or a stick in an open space and mark its shadow at particular time intervals by placing stones. And this helped them in determining the time of the day, since clock or watches were not used at that time. Now let's do an activity in page number 131. There, two images are given and you have to answer a question. In the activity, each picture shows the shadow formed by placing a pencil at a different distance from a lighted candle. You have to choose an option when the shadow is longer. The first option is when the pencil is away from the source of light, and the second option is when the pencil is closer to the source of light. The answer is option A, when the pencil is away from the source of light. So by comparing the two situations, the shadow is longer when the pencil is away from the source of light. That's all about the activity. So today we learned about different types of objects based on their ability to transmit light and the formation of shadows. Hope the topic was clear to you. You have to go through the topic today itself and study well. That's all for today. Thank you.